What people go through as children shapes their adulthood. What we often see as destructive or dysfunctional or chaotic adults simply started in their childhood, and these children are no exception. Thankfully, they were able to find a forever home with these people that adopted them, but they went through a lot with a mother who was neglectful, with a father who was neglectful, with family member and extended family that allowed it to happen and didn't stop it, and CPS that didn't protect them either. So listen to these two teen girls who give their stories and let people know how they ended up with these smiles, but what they had to go through to get to the other side. Go ahead and give their story time a listen. It's totally worth it and a very riveting story.
The system failed me. Ever since I could remember, social workers would come to our house, but nothing was ever done. I moved a lot because we got kicked out of the places that we would live at. We went from living in a house to an apartment, and then all 5 of us lived in one room, and then we moved from hotel to a hotel. By that time, I'd been through 7 elementary schools. We experienced hunger and thirst, but when the social workers would announce that they were coming, my birth giver would make sure to clean up and buy groceries. The social worker would never pull us aside to ask us what was really going on. We were always questioned in front of her, but she would cry and manipulate us into thinking that she was just a struggling single mom. At a young age, we were exposed to drugs, alcohol, sex, and so much more. A few family members knew what we were going through. Nobody cared to step up and just covered for her. We would get 1 pair of shoes once a year, so people at school wouldn't notice what was going on at home. But eventually those shoes would rip, and kids at school would bully us for the holes. We were always the kids to be in after-school program, and the last ones to be picked up. A couple of times, even the teachers would have to walk us home, because it was dark and we lived in a dangerous neighborhood. I always seemed okay, but inside I felt very lonely. But thankfully, I always had my siblings. I've always wondered when was this gonna stop, but this was just the beginning of it. Hi guys, so this is part 2 of Story of My Life. Before I get started, I just want to thank everyone for the kind messages that I've been receiving. Also, the topic that I'm going to be talking about can be hard to listen. So this is just a trigger warning, and it's okay to skip if you're not ready to hear. This part of my story is how my family failed me. So when I was 5 years old, I got sexually abused by one of my uncles. Obviously at that age, I didn't know what was happening. Every time we were over there at my aunt's house, I would always tell my mom that I didn't want to stay there, that I didn't want to be there, but she didn't care. I let my birth giver know that I was uncomfortable with this person. So we had after school program, and after school program, we had to walk to my aunt's house or my grandma's house. Because on part 1, remember that I mentioned that I was always left in after school program, and my birth giver never had time to pick me up, and we would walk to my aunt's house. And this man lived in my aunt's house, which happens to be my uncle. Me and my sisters would go there after school and wait for my birth giver to come. And then one day my grandpa said that we were gonna go to McDonald's, and then I asked if I could go with him, and he told me no, that I had to stay. So my grandpa ended up taking my 2 sisters, and I stayed home with my uncle, which I never understood why I had to stay home with him. He would take me to a room in the house, and that's where he would sexually abuse me. But I was too little to understand what was happening in the beginning. And then years passed, and one day when my grandma was showering me, she told me that no one should ever touch my body unless it's my mom and my grandma. And that's when I understood that what my uncle was doing was wrong. Okay, and then my birth giver always told me that I had to listen to adults. So as a kid, I thought I was doing the right thing by listening to him. But when I was telling him to stop, he would tell me that he was going to tell my mom that I wasn't listening to adults. And I didn't want to get in trouble, so I didn't tell no one. And I just want to take this moment to say that I'm sharing this story because many parents make the mistake of telling their kids that they need to listen to adults. Another reason why I didn't tell nobody in the beginning is because my family would always say that me and my siblings were liars, and they would always believe adults over me. So one day when I was at school, I believe I was in 3rd grade, I told my after school program teacher what my uncle was doing. I trusted my teacher more than I trusted my birth giver. So she called my grandma and she came and picked me up, and my grandma was asking me where I had pain, and I showed her the spot, and that's when I told her that my uncle was SA me. And she said, "Es que tú también." It's a term used to say it's your fault too. After my grandma's house, I went home, and the cops ended up calling my birth giver. Once they called us to the police station, my birth giver didn't say a word to me. It felt as in like everyone was disappointed in me, and I felt like I did something wrong. I was part of a family that cared more of their image than they cared about me. I'm gonna end up doing a part 2 because I have to go to church now, but I'll be back. Hi guys, so this is part 3 of the story of my life. So I left off by telling you guys that I told my teacher. So the abuse started when I was 5 and it ended when I was in 3rd grade. So I think I was 8. So after the interrogation with the cops, since the abuse was recent, I had to go to the doctors and get checked. They found his DNA on me. So my grandpa was taking me to school, and we always had to pass by my aunt's house where he lived at. We were driving by the house and they were arresting him. My grandpa stopped and watched him get arrested, and like the whole time he was just yelling at me, and my family members were crying for him, and I just felt like uncomfortable because I didn't want to watch him get arrested because I knew everybody would blame me. So they ended up giving him a plea deal because my birth giver didn't want to press charges on him. So I was informed that he would still go to jail because it was a legal matter. He did admit to it, and even then my family didn't believe me and they still blamed me for it, even though I was a child. A lot of family members decided to distance themselves from me because they would blame me. So he's due to come out when I'm 21. Even though it was considered rape and so much more, they still gave him a short amount of time in jail because my family didn't want to fight for me. Since my uncle was my grandpa's brother, my grandpa was very upset and would hit me for no reason. I saw some comments that you guys thought that my grandma was gonna come through and be the one to believe me, and unfortunately she didn't. But remember this because she's gonna come up again. Another part of my story that I will be telling you guys later. I'm going to start a new video for the next part because it doesn't have nothing to do with the topic that we're talking about. But if you guys think that this is bad, things do get worse. I'll be posting part 4 today. So I've been reading your guys' comments asking if my birth giver watches our videos, and the answer is yes, as well as some of our family members. My hopes is that through my videos they can realize how much trauma they caused me and they can stop blaming me for everything. So my birth giver would always focus on working, but she would work a lot, but there was never any money. We would always get kicked out of the places that we would stay at. She would work a lot that sometimes we would have to stay at the stairs of our apartments until she got home because she would always take the keys to the apartments. So we also got kicked out of after school program. So they made a deal with her that we were only allowed to walk 3 days out of the week. And the 2 days that she had to pick us up, she would pick us up at like 9, and that's why we got kicked out because the teachers couldn't stay that long. I remember this one time that it was really late and I was really thirsty, and I saw this random water bottle and I drank it, which ended up having something inside of it, so I blacked out. You might be wondering where's my dad and all this. So my dad was an alcoholic. He was in my life when I was a baby, and the last time I saw him was when I was like 4, and since that I didn't have communication with him, I didn't see him. And then out of nowhere my birth giver told us that we were going to hang out with my dad. At this point I was very emotional about seeing my dad because I haven't seen him in a very long time, and my birth giver was in like really bad stuff. I thought that my dad was going to step up and be in my life. So we went and everything was going really good. I wasn't being taken care of properly by my birth giver, so I had rashes and infections in my body. I told my dad, and he went to go get medicine for me, and at that point I felt like my dad was actually taking care of me, and that he was gonna be in my life forever, because I felt like the little affection was enough for me, because I've never had that. In 2017, I found out that my birth giver was having a baby, which made me very upset. She was not taking care of us, so I felt like very bad for the baby. I knew that it was going to be more stress for us, because at the end of the day that we were going to have to take care of my brother. So my dad did end up finding out that my birth giver was in very bad stuff. So he called CPS and got temporary custody of us. Me and one of my sisters have the same dad, so we went to go live with him. My other sister stayed with my brother. In the beginning of moving in with my dad, I thought that my life was going to be perfect. I thought that finally I was going to be happy. But little by little, I was noticing that something wasn't right. There was a lot of violence in the home, and it got to the point that I didn't want to stay at the house no more. At the time that I was visiting my birth giver, she was doing a lot better, or so I thought, because I saw my brother and my sister very happy. My sister's hair was always done. She was going to a really good school. I decided to move back in with my birth giver. Alright guys, so I'm gonna do another part, but I'll post it today. I was a victim of child abuse, and this is my story. Okay, so on part 4, I left off by telling you guys that I came back to live with my birth giver. At this time, she was living with my uncle and my uncle's wife, and we're gonna call her Jay. They were living with my uncle and Jay because they got kicked out of their apartment. At the beginning, living with Jay was hard because she actually had structure in her house that I was not used to. But it was actually really nice because she was loving and caring for us. She would make sure that we went to school fed and that our hair was done, that we looked presentable, and she would make sure that we went to school. It felt like she was our mom because she always took care of us and did everything that a mom was supposed to do. And my birth giver was never at the house because she was working, like I said, and she would hang out with her boyfriend. At this time, my birth giver was still doing the same things, not being present, not having food at home, never at home. But Jay always made sure that we were okay. At this time, life seemed good and we were happy. In the beginning, when my birth giver moved in with Jay and my uncle, it was just her, my little brother, and my sister. And then eventually I moved in, and then eventually my other sister moved in with all of us in Jay's house. The reason why my other sister moved back with us is because my dad ended up choosing his wife over his kids, so he brought my other sister back. At this time, Jay and my uncle were taking care of 5 people, and this became a financial struggle for Jay and my uncle, and she never bought food for the house. And I remember this one time that Jay meal prepped for the whole entire week for my uncle and her. It was her meal prep, and my birth giver fed us, and we ate that in one day. The problems between Jay and my birth giver became chaotic because my birth giver was super disrespectful towards Jay and sneak men into her house. Jay was really overprotective with us, so she didn't know the men. That's why she would always get worried. One of the men was my birth giver's baby daddy. He would neglect my siblings and just wanted to sleep with her, so that's why Jay kicked the man out. For months, Jay dealt with her BS because she didn't want to kick us out because she loved us, and knew by kicking her out that we would have to leave too. So at this time, my birth giver would put stuff in my head into believing that Jay was a really bad person, and she never told us the real reason. So little by little, I started distancing myself from Jay because I thought the stuff that my birth giver was telling me was real. And obviously it hurt my feelings because my birth giver told me that we were getting kicked out because of us. I believed her because Jay had never told me anything bad about my birth giver. But in reality, Jay just wanted her out. She had asked for us to stay. But of course, my birth giver denied that. And Jay was also dealing with her own problems. She had recently lost her grandpa. And right at this time, I also had lost my grandpa too. My grandpa had always promised us to buy us a house. He always said that he was going to win the lottery for us to buy our house. We buried my grandpa in El Salvador. Jay offered to take care of us. Jay and my uncle gave my birth giver money to help with the funeral. Most of my family members went to El Salvador. They were only supposed to be there for about a week. The day after the funeral, we got informed that she had left El Salvador, and when everybody had ended up coming back, she was nowhere to be found. We would call and text her, and by this time, it was about to be almost 2 weeks, and I came to find out that instead of being here with us through this difficult time, she was in Honduras with her boyfriend on a vacation with the money that Jay and my uncle gave to her. During this time, I would cry and leave her voicemails begging her to come home, but she was just living her best life. Our time at Jay's and my uncle's house came into an end because my birth giver was just super disrespectful to Jay when all Jay was doing is just trying to help us. So I had mentioned to you guys that my grandpa had passed away, so he left money to ensure that me and my siblings and my birth giver were taken care of, and that money was supposed to be for our house. When my grandpa was alive, he had always talked about how much he wanted to get us a house. But my birth giver ended up getting this money and had promised us that we were going to get our house finally, and that this house was going to be really big, that we would all have our own rooms, and we would have everything that we've ever wanted. We were really sad to leave Jay's house, but we were really excited because we were going to get the house of our dream. All her promises made me excited for what was to come. And when I thought life was going to get better, it got 10 times worse. I was a victim of child abuse, and this is my story. Part 6. So I had left off at telling you guys that we ended up moving out of Jay's house and we went to rent a room in someone's house. Mind you, we were 5 people in one room. At this time, she did have money because my grandpa had left us money. So she told us that the room that we were staying at was temporary until her boyfriend from Honduras came over here for us to move to a big house. But recently, she had found out that she was pregnant with her 5th child. You guys remember how I told you guys that she went to Honduras after my grandpa passed away? Well, that's where she ended up pregnant. So she ended up trying to bring her boyfriend from Honduras 2 times, which she ended up spending a big chunk of the money that my grandpa left us for our house. His boyfriend ended up cheating on her and she had a miscarriage. We lived in California and she wanted to move us far away from everyone because she was tired of people telling her how to be a better parent, because at this time people were starting to notice that we were being neglected. We obviously didn't want to move out there, but she promised us a big house, horses, just everything that we wanted out there, and that 2020 was going to be a fresh year. So when we first got to North Carolina, we didn't get the house. We were jumping from hotel to hotel until finally we moved to a trailer. I moved you guys inside because it was too hot outside. We were at the hotels. My birth giver would leave us there. My birth giver was getting into really bad stuff. At the time, I was 9 and my little brother David was 11 months. And my older sister was 11. Sometimes she would leave cash. So we would go to the grocery store and buy food there. But eventually the money would run out. Sometimes she would come right when the money ran out. But sometimes we would starve. After leaving at the hotel, she met this guy, and we're gonna call him Jake. Jake was living in a farm, and we went to go visit him out there. My birth giver barely knew Jake when she brought us over to his house. We only saw him once, but during that time, he was being very touchy towards me, and I didn't like that, and when I told him to stop, he wouldn't. My birth giver had to go back home because she had to work the next day. Jake asked my birth giver if we can sleep over, and she said yes. And then I told her if she left me there that I was gonna call the cops on her. So she took us home, and on the way there, I told her what he was doing, and then my siblings told my birth giver how uncomfortable they were around him because he was very touchy. And all she said that I think that you guys should give him another chance. Eventually, we moved from the hotels to a trailer. We were a little bit happy because this was better than the hotels. But like the hotels, she would leave us At this time, my brother was 1 and we didn't have any diapers for him. So we would cut our shirts and make them into diapers for him. At this point, it was 2020 and the pandemic had started, and that's why we were going to school because school was shut down. Since I was very used to my birth giver not coming home, I wasn't even alarmed that she wasn't back because she would do this oftenly. There was times that we would run out of food. So my oldest sister would go to the neighbor's house and ask for food. And the neighbors would give us food. They would make sure that we had electricity just because in North Carolina it was really cold. One day she met this dude, and we're gonna call him T. The guy that she had met was in really bad stuff. So little by little, I saw my birth giver losing herself to this man. She would be gone for weeks, and then eventually we didn't see her for a long period of time. There was days that we were embarrassed to go ask for food, so we would just starve. She stopped paying rent and electricity. So every single day the landlord would come and tell us that we had to move out and that we were getting evicted. I wanted to call back home to California, but she stopped paying our phone bills and the Wi-Fi that was in the house. She stopped paying that too, so we had absolutely no contact with anybody. There was a really big storm, and my big sister got really scared because my brother kept crying. She ran to our friend's house and told them what was going on. Our friend's dad came and got all of us and took us to his house, where I connected to Wi-Fi and I got in contact with my family back in California. She had abandoned us, and I kept calling and begging her to come home. At this time, I got in contact with my grandma, and my sister had got in contact with Jade. She moved us across the country just to abandon us, knowing that there is no family out there that could help us. CPS and the cops got called. Eventually, my grandma came to North Carolina and she picked us up. All of a sudden, my birth giver came back. She showed up. She was all drugged up. The cops went inside of our house and realized the really bad conditions that we were living in. We left with my grandma back to California, but my birth giver did end up getting arrested, and we moved back to California. And just when you think that our life was finally gonna get better and that things were gonna be better, I wish this was all a joke, but it got worse. I'll be posting the next part on a separate video because it has nothing to do with North Carolina. I was a victim of child abuse, and this is my story, part 7. I left off by letting you guys know my birth giver got arrested in North Carolina, and that my grandma and my grandma's husband came to North Carolina to take us back to California. Jay and my uncle had offered to financially support 2 of us, and the other 2 would live with my grandma and her husband. About a month that my birth giver was in jail, they bailed her out, and my grandma forced me and my siblings to call her. Mind you, she abandoned us, but yet my grandma still forced us to call her and to call her mom. We were really sad because we were still processing that we got abandoned by my birth giver in North Carolina and that we were coming back to California after 8 months. At this time, my grandma's husband thought it was a good idea to tell us the rules. At the time we arrived to my grandma's house, Jay and my uncle were there. We had came back with our heads full of lice. My little brother had to shave off his hair because he had a lot of lice, and it was really painful. For the first 3 weeks, Jay and my uncle were co-parenting with my grandma. It was about 3 days that we stayed with Jay, that way my grandma could have a break. But eventually my grandma's husband didn't allow us to do that no more. Remember, 2 of us were supposed to go live with Jay. That never ended up happening because my grandma's husband didn't allow that. So my grandma was responsible for the 4 of us and 1 kid of her own and my great grandma. This became really stressful for my grandma, so once again Jay and my uncle offered to take 2 of us. They also had already bought beds and everything like that, but my grandma said that her husband didn't allow that. We came back to live in California August of 2020. I had just turned 10. After 2 weeks of us living there, he started hitting us. He would hit us for any little reason. He went from hitting us to inappropriately touching us. In the beginning, he would touch us in a way that it seemed like it was just an accident. For example, when we would go to the pool, I would feel his hand touching my butt, but I thought it was an accident because I thought he was just swimming around. After a few times of this happening, I confronted him because I felt uncomfortable. I told him that I knew that he was doing it and that I felt really uncomfortable and I wanted him to stop. And he just rubbed my back, looked at me and smirked, but was mumbling but laughing. My grandma's husband would hit me, touch me, and mentally abuse me. He took advantage of me because he knew that nobody would believe me. And then he would threaten me, that way I wouldn't say anything. He wouldn't let us go out in general. He also completely stopped letting us go to Jay's house, and we couldn't contact her. During this time, it was still COVID time, so we were still doing school at home. He would control what I was doing on my computer. I was never allowed to talk to my teachers or counselors alone. After North Carolina, Jay offered to take us to therapy, but my grandma's husband said that we didn't need therapy, that all we needed was our family and God. When Jay would come, I would try to talk to her in private, but my grandma would always stand there right at the door, so I never felt comfortable to tell her what was going on. The sexual abuse continued to happen for about a year, so I was scared to tell my grandma because since the first time she didn't believe me, I knew that she was not going to believe me, especially because it was her husband. I forgot to mention that he was the leader of the band at church, and everybody looked up to him. Eventually, I became numb to everything. I hated my life. I felt like I was robbed from my innocence and my childhood. I trusted no adult. We had no privacy. When I was showering, he used to come into the bathroom and he used to open the curtain. The doors couldn't be closed or locked. He always had access to come in whenever he wanted to. I remember my sister telling him that I was changing and he just opened the door. In my family, I never felt love. One of my aunts told me that she only loved me because I was her blood, but if I wasn't, then she wouldn't love me. She said that because I told her that I could not forgive my birth giver for causing me all that trauma that happened and everything that I went through. At this time, there was rumors that my birth giver was gonna come back. And my grandma kept telling us that as soon as she came back to California, that we were gonna go live with her. After she told me that, I was very upset because I didn't understand why she would want us to go back with my birth giver than letting us live with Jay. One day my grandma had told us to get ready because there was new family members that had came in from El Salvador that we had to meet. So we went to my aunt's house, and to my biggest surprise, my birth giver was laying down on the bed. She had came back because she had gotten in a car accident. I will be posting part 8 tomorrow. Make sure to go follow us on Instagram just in case TikTok gets banned. I was a victim of child abuse, and this is my story. Part 8. I think this would be the last part of my story. A lot of people had questions about my age and when things happened. So the first time I got sexually abused by one of my uncles, it started when I was in kindergarten through 3rd grade. And the second time I got sexually abused by my grandma's husband, it started when I was 10 and didn't end until I was 11. I believe all this stuff happened because my birth giver being in and out of my life. These people knew that nobody would protect me and took advantage of me. I felt numbed when all this was happening. A lot of you guys have commented how strong I am, but everything that has happened to me broke my heart. I have a lot of trauma from it, and I realized that my family never loved me. CPS was in and out of my life, but yet never did anything about it. After my birth giver abandoned us and CPS was called, her rights were never taken away. They just gave us away to another family member and never checked up on us. Especially through COVID time, I think they should have came to our house and seen if we were okay, because clearly we couldn't go to school and tell anybody. If you guys have been following this story, you guys know that my birth giver came back to California after being gone for a whole year. I honestly feel like she came back because she got in a car accident and she needed help moving around. Once we saw her in the room, my grandma forced me to go hug her. She came to live at my grandma's house where we were forced to take care of her. My birth giver would always play the victim card. My grandma's husband's punishments would get worse. He punished me one time by not giving me food. This was very triggering towards me because of the situation that happened at North Carolina where I was starved. So that day, my grandma's husband had left. My birth giver asked my grandma if she could take us out, and my grandma said yes, just be back before he got home. We got in the car and she told us that she was gonna take us to Jay's house. Like I said, he didn't let us have contact or see her at all. So at this point, it was like months since we haven't seen her. So we were really excited. Like, you could tell that I was crying. So when we got to Jay's house, she asked me what happened, and I said nothing. And then my sister told her what ended up happening. Jay ended up calling my birth giver and telling her how he was treating us, and to tell her that he had punished me by making me starve. So once Jay talked to my birth giver about it, she didn't seem to care at all. Before we tell you guys how we got out of this situation, we've seen some comments asking about my other sister, so she will do her own part of this story, and then we will tell you guys how we got out of this. Hi guys, so this is a continuation of the story of our life that my sister has already told you about, but I just wanted to come on here and tell my side of the story. So I was the oldest out of the 4. Ever since I was 10 years old, I took care of my brother since he was born. He knew me as his mom because our mom was always leaving us, so I made sure my siblings were taken care of. I struggled in school because I was always focused on taking care of my siblings. Like my sister told you guys, we experienced a lot of hunger. There is times where I go knocking on my neighbor's house, asking for food and water. At the beginning, my birth giver will leave us alone for about 2 days, and then it started to become more days. And then eventually she'll leave for a long time that we lost track of when she would leave. At this time, we lived in North Carolina. All of us were starving, so I felt responsible to go look for food. But then there was a big storm, and me and my siblings were scared because there was thunder and lightning. We were all hungry, so as the big sister, I went to my neighbor's house to ask for food, and he helped me get my siblings and bring them to his house. And that's when he reached out to the police. So then my grandma and her husband ended up bringing us back to California. And then a week into us living with her, her husband started sexually abusing me. At this time, I didn't know my sisters were getting sexually abused. He would threaten me and would scare me to not say anything. He would force me to go to church with him in a separate car than my family so that he could molest me. There was times where he would tell my grandma that he needed to go to the dumpster and he would take me. And I would tell my grandma I didn't want to go, and she would still force me to go. Sometimes I would ask her if my siblings could come, but their response was no, that I had to go alone. When we would go to the dumpster, he would take advantage of being alone and he would sexually abuse me. I was so afraid of him that I would freeze and not do anything about it. I was being mentally and physically abused at this home, and I didn't know how to get out of it. I was afraid of telling somebody and not being believed, so I just kept it to myself. His punishments were getting worse and worse. He was getting very controlling of us. He would hit us for no reason. One day he came home and he was upset because my brother had a dirty diaper. So he took off my brother's diaper. He told me and my sisters to take off our pants and our underwears. He smeared my brother's poop on our butts. And he forced us to keep it there until it dried up. I'm sharing my story because a lot of kids become victims of abuse in their own family. And unfortunately, a lot of times we are not believed. A lot of you guys are wondering how we got out of this situation. And we will be posting another video of how we became free out of this. Thank you for watching. I was a victim of child abuse, and this is my story. If you guys have been following my story, you guys know that I've experienced child abuse ever since I was 5. So in the last video, I mentioned that the last day that I was living at my grandma's with her abusive husband, I got punished by not being fed. So at this time, we haven't seen Jay around 6 months because my grandma's husband didn't allow us to see Jay or have communication with her. Jay ended up contacting my birth giver and asked if she can pretend to take us out, but instead she was gonna go take us to visit Jay. So my sister ended up telling Jay what had happened with the food situation. So Jay ended up calling my birth giver and telling her what was going on, and she didn't seem to care. Jay had a feeling that something was wrong at my grandma's house. Mind you, we haven't told her yet what was really going on, but Jay told my birth giver that she wasn't gonna allow us to take us over there. Jay gave my birth giver 2 options. She said, you either leave them here or the next morning I'm gonna call CPS on my grandma and my grandma's husband. I forgot to mention that my little brother, he was living with my birth giver. So on October 16 of 2021, my two sisters and me came to live with Jay. And finally, it felt like my life was getting better. Immediately when we came to live with Jay, she signed us up for therapy. Everything was going good, but we still haven't told her my grandma's husband was sexually abusing us at this point, especially because my other family members had not believed me in the past. And since she was new to the family, I felt like she wasn't going to believe me. In December, one of my sisters were struggling mentally. So one night she went to go talk to Jay. We had school the next day, so me and my other sister went to sleep. The next day I dropped off at school, but my sister didn't go to school. I got picked up early because I had a doctor's appointment. I got in the car. My sister and Jay looked like they were crying. Their eyes were red and puffy. So I told them to tell me what was going on. And this is when my sister told me that my grandma's husband was sexually abusing her, and she had never told me, like I never knew. And I was in disbelief. I started crying and yelling because I thought this was only happening to me. Sorry guys, we had to bring my little brother to practice, but I'm gonna finish this in the car. Jay automatically believed us. I felt really relieved because finally someone had believed me, even though she wasn't blood to me. She was willing to stand up for us. That day I had a doctor's appointment and there was a social worker there, so Jay and I reported it to her. Later I ended up finding out that she never filed a report for it, so that is also how the system failed me. Next day I was feeling really sad and I ended up telling my teacher, and that's who reported it. Jay thought by telling the social worker that she was gonna report it, but gladly my teacher reported it. And the next day, Jay received a call from the detective. Mind you, Jay at this point didn't have any legal rights of us, so my birth giver could take us away at any moment. Jay was told by the detective not to tell my birth giver, since we believe she would have told my grandma's husband, or at least told my grandma. While dealing with all this, Jay receives a call from CPS asking her if she could take in my brother. Jay told the social worker that she was financially struggling, but she would take him in. Jay ended up taking time off of work because my brother was 3 years old and needed someone to take care of him. So after almost a month, Jay needed to get back to work. So she asked the social worker if she can at least get food stamps or free daycare, so that way she can go back to work and support us with my uncle financially. My uncle was the only one financially taking care of us. So the social worker said instead of giving Jay help, that she could just return my little brother to my birth giver, although she was not able to care for him. But since Jay didn't have any legal rights, Jay was forced to give back my little brother to my birth giver. After a month of him being back with my birth giver, Jay gets a call again from a new social worker saying that they are removing my little brother from my birth giver and he was going to be placed into foster care. Because Jay had no legal rights of us, we all had to be placed into foster care. I also forgot to mention that right after my brother was removed, she got pregnant with her 5th child. And yeah, I've seen you guys' comments trying to guess who Jay is. So once we were placed into foster care, Jay being the amazing person that she is, Jay ended up getting licensed and becoming our foster mom. For those of you guys that don't know how the foster care system works, it's basically all about reunification, which means after they read that everything happened in the past, including my birth giver abandoning us, they still gave her 2 years to reunify us. So pretty much they gave her a second chance. So for these 2 years, they advocated for us. She went to every single court hearing. We feared that we would all get put back there or be separated, and that my little brother would have to go back to my birth giver. And the social worker would bribe him by saying that my birth giver had a present for my little brother, and that was just wrong. 2 years later, my uncle and Jay adopted us and got custody for our little brother. Here's a picture of all of us through the process of Jay and my uncle getting custody and adopting us. Everybody has belittled and humiliated Jay. My uncle was the only blood related person that stuck up for us and believed us. But a lot of you guys are wondering what happened to my grandma and my grandma's husband. So the detectives look into all the evidence, and on December 2021, 2 days before New Year's, he got pulled over on his way back from work. and they arrested him. My birth giver called Jay and told her that my grandma had called her crying, saying that her husband got arrested. So my uncle called my grandma and asked her if we can come over, that way we can talk about it. She said that she didn't want to talk to us and that this was all a lie and that we ruined her life. My birth giver told Jay on the phone that she didn't know what to believe. So once again, no surprise there. All you guys are wondering, where is my other sister? I'm gonna start off by saying that Jay took all of us out of that situation. We all got the same opportunity, but unfortunately she decided to leave. She said the reason why she was leaving is that because she wanted to get away from my grandma's husband, my birth giver, just everyone, and she wanted to leave out of this area because we live close by. She ended up going to live with my dad, and that did not work out, so she went back to my birth giver. My family didn't believe us. On the next video, Jay is going to be talking to you guys how she ended up getting us and how everything went down on her point of view. We have recorded our whole process of trial. I want children that have experienced this to know that they're not alone. A lot of times people of our own family are the ones that abuse us, and a lot of times we're not believed, and sometimes it's really scary to speak up. So we recorded the whole process of trial to hopefully empower children to speak up. Thank you to everybody that has listened to my story and that has sent kind messages to us. I know a lot of this was difficult to hear, but I'm speaking up and bringing awareness.